All right, so let's dive right in. Today, we're taking a deep dive into project procurement management. That critical,
Yeah,
but often overlooked part of, well, getting things done.
right.
And to guide us through this journey, we'll be using Chapter 12 of the PMBOK. So if you have your copy handy, feel free to follow along.
Absolutely.
By the end of this deep dive, you'll be ready to navigate even the most complex procurement landscapes.
It's fascinating how often project procurement management is misunderstood.
Oh, tell me about it.
People think it's just about contracts and paperwork,
Yeah,
but it's so much more than that.
I bet.
It's really about building those strategic relationships you need to bring in the best external resources.
So it's not just about, hiring a contractor or buying some equipment. It's about making sure those external resources are truly aligned with your project goals.
Exactly. I
I
like
like
it. Let's say you're building a website and decide to go with a fixed price contract.
Okay.
Seems pretty straightforward, right? But then you suddenly realize you need a sophisticated e-commerce feature. Things can get complicated pretty quickly.
Oh, yeah.
That fixed price might not cover it, and renegotiating can throw your whole project off track.
Makes sense.
That's why understanding all those nuances of procurement is so important.
Absolutely. So how does the PMBOK break down this whole process?
Well, it outlines 3 key processes:
Okay.
plan procurement management, conduct procurements, and control procurements.
Got it.
It's kind of like building a house. First you create the blueprint,
Right.
then you construct it,
Yep.
and finally you manage and maintain it.
I like that analogy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so walk me through that first stage. Plan procurement management. What are the crucial things we need to consider?
Well, it all starts with understanding your project needs.
Okay.
What resources do you absolutely need to bring in from outside?
Right.
Think, specialized equipment, software, unique expertise, maybe even specific materials.
Right.
That's where inputs like the project scope and risk register come in. You've got to know exactly what you need and what potential roadblocks you might encounter.
So the risk register is kind of like your early warning system.
Precisely.
Okay.
It helps you anticipate those problems before they derail your project.
Right.
Let's say you're working on a construction project, and your risk register flags potential delays due to material shortages during planning. You could address this by maybe securing alternative suppliers
Right.
or building in some buffer time.
Yeah, that's a great example. So once we know our needs and potential risks, what's next?
Then comes the critical step of deciding whether to make or buy.
Okay.
Do you have the resources and expertise in-house, or is it more efficient to procure externally?
Yeah.
This is where you really weigh the pros and cons, factoring in things like cost, risk, and control.
Right.
It's not just about finding the cheapest option. It's about finding the option that best aligns with your overall project goals.
Yeah, that decision can get pretty complex, right?
Oh, absolutely.
There are probably a lot of financial and strategic factors to consider.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sometimes a simple payback period calculation can do the trick,
Right.
but other times you might need to dive deeper into things like ROI or discounted cash flow analysis. It really depends on the complexity of your project and the potential impact of that decision.
Right. Makes sense. So once we figured out what to procure and whether to make or buy, what's next in the plan procurement management process?
Well, next comes one of the most exciting parts.
Okay.
Choosing the right type of contract.
All right.
Think of it like picking the right tool for the job.
Okay.
For well-defined projects, a fixed price contract is like your trusty hammer. Everything's laid out up front, price, deliverables, timelines. But when things are a little less certain, a cost-reimbursable contract, that's more like a flexible Swiss Army knife.
Okay.
It allows for those adjustments as the project evolves,
Right.
which can be crucial in, fast-paced or unpredictable environments.
Yeah, that analogy really clarifies things. But how do you know which type of contract is the best fit
Yeah.
for your specific project?
It really comes down to the level of risk you're comfortable with.
Okay.
Fixed price contracts are great for minimizing financial risk for the buyer, but the trade-off is flexibility. If the scope changes, you might end up renegotiating, which can lead to delays and cost overruns.
Right.
Cost-reimbursable contracts, on the other hand, well, they offer more flexibility,
Yeah.
but they also come with a higher level of financial risk for the buyer.
So it's a balancing act. You have to weigh the need for predictability against the need for flexibility.
Exactly. And then you've got the hybrid type,
Mm-hmm.
the time and materials contract.
Okay.
This is like bringing in a consultant on an hourly rate. You pay for the time and materials they use, which can be good for those short-term specialized tasks.
Right.
But you need to carefully monitor costs to avoid surprises.
Right. Makes sense. It seems like having a clear procurement management plan is crucial for navigating all these different contract types and potential pitfalls.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This plan becomes your roadmap, outlining your procurement strategy, timelines, key activities, and even how you'll measure success.
Right.
It helps ensure everyone is on the same page and working toward those same goals.
This is all starting to make a lot more sense. So once we've got our plan in place, what's next? How do we actually go about finding and selecting the right external resources?
Well, that's where the second key process comes in. Conduct procurements.
Right.
We've got our blueprint. Now it's time to start building.
Right.
And that brings us to another set of tools and techniques that can really make or break your project.
So we've got our procurement plan in place. We know what we need, and we've even chosen the right contract type. What happens next in this conduct procurements phase?
Well, this is where you go from planning to action.
Okay.
Remember those bid documents we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
RFIs, RFQs, RFPs.
Right.
This is where they come into play.
Okay.
It's how you reach out to potential sellers and say, hey, we've got a project here and we need your expertise.
Okay, so let's break that down a little bit.
Yeah.
I get that these documents help us communicate our needs, but what makes a really effective bid document?
Think of it like a first date. You want to make a good impression, be really clear about what you're looking for, and get enough information to decide if you want to move forward or not.
Right.
A good bid document needs to be crystal clear about the scope of work, what a successful outcome looks like, how proposals will be evaluated, and of course, all the nitty-gritty details about timelines and submissions.
So it's not just about throwing a bunch of information at them. It's about being strategic and focused in how we communicate.
Absolutely.
Okay.
For example, let's say you're developing a new mobile app and you need a top-notch development team.
Right.
Your RFP needs to clearly outline the app's functionality, the target audience, maybe even your budget range. But you wouldn't necessarily include details about your marketing strategy. That's a different conversation for later.
Right. Makes sense. I'm starting to see how important it is to tailor these documents to each specific project.
Right.
Yeah.
An RFI, for instance, is like dipping your toes in the water.
Okay.
You're gathering information from potential sellers before you even finalize your requirements.
Okay.
An RFQ is more straightforward, like asking for a price list at a restaurant. And then the RFP is the full course meal. You're looking for a detailed proposal that shows they really understand your needs and can deliver.
Okay, that definitely clarifies the differences. So once those bids start rolling in, how do we sift through them and find the best fit?
Yeah, this is where you become a judge in the project procurement Olympics.
Okay.
You've got your scorecard with criteria like experience, capability, cost, delivery timelines, maybe even cultural fit. You're not just looking for the cheapest option, but the one that aligns best with your project goals and values.
Yeah. So it's like a multifaceted evaluation, not just a race to the bottom dollar.
Precisely.
Got it.
You might even use a weighted scoring system.
Okay.
Where certain criteria are more important than others. For instance, if quality is paramount, you might give it a higher weight than cost.
Makes sense.
And don't forget about due diligence.
Right.
Checking references, reviewing portfolios, even having in-person interviews can give you valuable insights beyond what's on paper.
This whole selection process sounds pretty intensive.
It can be. But making the right choice up front can save you a lot of headaches down the road.
Right. That's true. So you've identified your winner. It's time to move on to the negotiation phase.
Right.
Now, I imagine this is where things can get a little, well, intense.
Yeah.
Like hammering out the details and making sure both sides are happy.
Negotiation is definitely an art form.
Right.
But it doesn't have to be adversarial. Think of it as a collaborative process where both sides come to the table with their needs and work together to find solutions that benefit everyone. It's about clarifying the scope, agreeing on payment terms, setting those realistic performance metrics, and ultimately creating a contract that everyone feels good about signing.
So it's not about, winning the negotiation. It's about finding common ground and establishing a solid foundation for a successful partnership.
Exactly.
I like it.
And remember, a well-crafted contract protects both the buyer and the seller. It outlines everyone's responsibilities, sets clear expectations, and helps prevent misunderstandings down the line.
This is all making a lot of sense. So once the contract is signed, sealed, and delivered, we're basically done with the conduct procurements phase, right?
That's right.
Okay, you've selected your champion, the contract is in place. Now it's time to transition to the final phase of project procurement management, control procurements.
This sounds like where we keep everything on track and make sure the partnership is actually delivering the goods.
Yeah.
I'm guessing this phase is all about monitoring, managing,
Yeah.
and maybe even a little bit of hand-holding. Well, maybe not hand-holding, but definitely close collaboration and communication.
Okay.
This is where we shift from selecting the right partner to managing the relationship effectively.
Got it.
We need to make sure that the seller is meeting their commitments, the deliverables are high quality, and the project stays on schedule and within budget.
So what are some key elements of effectively controlling procurement?
One of the most important aspects is establishing clear communication channels.
Right.
Regular meetings, progress reports, even leveraging technology like shared project management platforms can keep everyone in the loop and address issues before they snowball into bigger problems.
You mentioned technology, and I've heard about some interesting trends in that area, like using webcams on construction sites to provide real-time visibility to stakeholders.
Oh, absolutely.
Is that something you're seeing more of these days?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a game changer for transparency and accountability.
I bet.
Imagine being able to virtually walk through a construction site from your office and see the progress firsthand. It can help manage expectations, prevent disputes, even improve safety by identifying potential hazards early on.
That's amazing. It seems like technology is really transforming the way we manage procurements these days.
It is. And it's not just about cameras and software. We're also seeing a shift in contracting processes themselves, particularly in agile and adaptive environments.
Right.
Traditional rigid contracts don't always work well in these fast-paced, iterative settings.
So how are contracts evolving to keep pace with these new ways of working?
We're seeing a rise in flexible contract models,
Got it.
like master service agreements, MSAs.
Mm-hmm.
These establish a framework for collaboration over a longer period, allowing for adjustments to the scope and deliverables as the project evolves. They're like having a trusted partner on call, ready to adapt to changing needs and priorities.
That's fascinating. Seems like the procurement landscape is becoming much more dynamic and responsive. But let's get back to those core processes for a moment. We've covered planning and conducting procurements. But I'm curious to delve a little deeper into the specifics of controlling those procurements. What are some key tools and techniques that come into play here?
Well, one of the most crucial aspects is performance monitoring.
Okay.
This involves tracking deliverables against the agreed-upon schedule,
Yeah.
measuring the quality of work, and making sure the seller is adhering to the budget.
Mm-hmm.
You might use tools like earned value analysis,
Right.
trend analysis, or even just simple performance reviews to get a clear picture of how things are progressing.
So it's about constantly checking in, making sure things are on track,
Yeah,
and course correcting when necessary.
exactly.
Okay.
And remember, this is a collaborative effort.
Right.
You're not just policing the seller, you're working together to achieve the project goals. Open communication is essential, and so is having a clear process for handling any issues or disputes that might arise.
Speaking of disputes, what happens when things go wrong? Like, what if there's a disagreement about the scope of work or the quality of deliverables? How do you handle those situations?
Well, that's where a well-defined claims administration process comes in.
Okay.
This is usually outlined in the contract itself and provides a structured way to address any claims or disputes. It might involve submitting a formal claim,
Right.
providing supporting documentation, and attempting to resolve the issue through negotiation or mediation.
So it's about having a clear roadmap for navigating these tricky situations and finding solutions that are fair to both parties.
Exactly.
Good.
The goal is to resolve disputes efficiently and fairly, preserving that working relationship as much as possible. And remember, thorough documentation is crucial throughout this entire control procurements process.
I can see how important documentation is, not just for legal purposes, but also for capturing lessons learned and improving future procurement processes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
By documenting your experiences, both good and bad, you create a valuable knowledge base that can inform future projects and help you avoid repeating past mistakes.
This has been incredibly insightful. We've covered a lot of ground, from planning and conducting procurements to the intricacies of controlling them effectively. But before we wrap things up, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the human side of procurement.
You mean the importance of building strong relationships with your external partners?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It seems like it's about more than just contracts and paperwork. It's about trust, communication, and a shared commitment to success.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, procurement is about people working together to achieve a common goal.
Right.
And just like any relationship, it requires open communication, mutual respect, and a willingness to collaborate.
Right.
When you build those strong connections, the project benefits, and everyone wins.
That's a great point to end on. Building those strong relationships can make all the difference in the world. But before we close out this deep dive, there's one more aspect of controlled procurements I'd like to explore. Specifically, how do we know when we've reached the finish line?
Contract closure.
Yes.
That's the final step in the procurement journey, and it's just as important as all the others.
So contract closure,
Hmm.
the final chapter in our procurement saga.
You got it.
What does a successful contract closure actually look like?
Well, it's all about making sure both sides have fulfilled their commitments and that all the loose ends are, tied up neatly.
Mm-hmm.
We verify that all the deliverables have been met according to the agreed upon standards and that all invoices have been paid. Think of it as a thorough inspection before handing over the keys to a new house.
So we're checking off those punch list items, making sure everything is in order. What else is involved in this final walkthrough?
Documentation, of course.
Of-
We need to make sure all the relevant documents are in place, from signed contracts and change orders to performance reports and payment records. This creates a clear audit trail and protects both parties if any questions or issues arise down the line.
Yeah, it's like that old saying, if it wasn't documented, it didn't happen.
Exactly.
Right.
But contract closure isn't just about paperwork and legalities. It's also an opportunity to reflect on the procurement process itself, to gather those valuable lessons learned.
Well, like that.
What worked well? What could have been done better? Did we choose the right contract type? Did our communication strategies hit the mark? By capturing these insights, we can continuously improve our approach to procurement and set ourselves up for even greater success on future projects.
Yeah, I love that perspective. It's not just about crossing the finish line. It's about taking those valuable lessons and applying them to the next race.
Right.
So once all the paperwork is signed, the lessons are learned, and everyone has given each other a high five, what happens next?
Well, then it's time to celebrate. You've successfully navigated the complex world of project procurement, brought in the resources you needed, and delivered a successful project. It's a significant accomplishment, and it's definitely worth taking a moment to acknowledge everyone's hard work and contributions.
Cheers to that. I think we all deserve a pat on the back for making it through this deep dive into project procurement management. It's been quite a journey, but I feel like I've gained a whole new level of understanding and appreciation for this critical aspect of project management.
Me too.
Yeah.
And I hope our listeners feel the same way.
Absolutely.
We've covered a lot of ground, from the foundational principles to the latest trends and best practices. But remember, this is just the beginning of your procurement journey.
And speaking of beginnings, as we wrap up this deep dive, we always like to leave our listeners with a thought-provoking question to ponder. So here it is. How can you apply the insights we've discussed today to improve your own procurement processes, build stronger partnerships, and ultimately deliver even more successful projects? Think about it, explore it, and let it guide your approach to procurement in the future.
That's a great question to leave everyone with. And remember, procurement isn't just about following a set of rules or checking off boxes. It's about creating value, fostering collaboration, and achieving outstanding results.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Until next time, happy procuring.